In this movie, I want us to talk about writing commit messages and the best practices for doing that. Now, in the last movie, we did our first commit and we gave it a really simple single line commit message that was just initial commit. Pretty bland and boring, and even worse, it doesn't really describe what we were doing. What you really want to do is have a commit message that describes the changes that you're making in that commit set. So added file to project, that would be more descriptive, saying that we added this first file, that you added the JavaScript to something, that you were fixing a bug. We're labeling what we were doing in this change set, so when we come back and look at it later, we can just look at the commit message and know what's inside, what's contained in that set. So we want to have good descriptive commit messages. There are also some other best practices that we should follow. We want to start with a short single-line summary, less than 50 characters. Keep it short. Optionally, we can follow that by a blank line and then a more complete description. Now, if you're just making a tiny little change, a single-line summary will do it. But if you're committing a change that has lots of changes that take place in lots of files, it might be worthwhile to have a more complete description. Now, the way we were doing it before from the single command line, that's a little tricky to do inside those double quotes. But we can also use a text editor to make these commit messages as well. And that makes it easier to do multi-line commit messages. Even then, you want to keep those additional lines to less than 72 characters. And that's because different people may be looking at your commit log from different types of tools. They may be using Mac or Windows, viewing it on the web, graphical user interfaces. They may be receiving those commit information via email. So we want to limit it to 72 characters. And you want to write commit messages in the present tense, not in the past tense. You're labeling what this commit does, not what you, as the creator, were doing. You label what it does. This fixes a bug, not I fixed a bug. It's not about you, it's about what this commit is. If you need to have bullet points to describe what happens, you usually use asterisks or hyphens. And you can add ticket tracking numbers from bugs or support requests, or develop a shorthand for your organization. So maybe you put, for example, in square brackets at the beginning of your message that you were messing with the CSS or the JavaScript. Or maybe you label all bug fixes with bug fix : or put a tracking number in the front letting it know what sort of support request ticket it goes with. These kinds of decisions will really be personal preferences that you or your organization will need to decide on. But it's a good idea to pick standards like this and then stick with them and get everyone to agree to it so that everyone working on the repository is using the same set of conventions for their commit messages. So you want to be clear and descriptive. So for example, bad fix typo would be an example of a bad commit because it doesn't really tell what's going on. A good example would be add missing closing bracket in project section of HTML. Much more descriptive of what we were doing, what was going on, what is the typo, what were we in here trying to fix. Bad, update login code. That's pretty general. A good example, change user authentication to use Blowfish, right? Much more descriptive about what was going on and what we were doing with this change. Again, providing good labels on the outside of the envelope. And then another bad example would be to include other comments in there that really aren't about the commit. So updates member report, comma, we should discuss if this is right next week. Well, this commit is going to live in our repository potentially for years and years and years. Having a comment that says we should discuss if this is right next week, this isn't email, right? This is not a way to communicate with our team members. We can do that using other tools. What we want to do here is just provide a good label for what's inside the commit. So let's take a look at an example of one good commit. So here's an example of a good commit message. It's got a tracking number. This is the convention that this company is going to use for tracking support tickets. T23094- fixes bug in admin logout. That's a little bit vague, but we've got something underneath it that gives it more description. When an admin logged out of the admin area, they could not log into the members area because their session user ID was still set to the admin ID. This patch fixes the bug by setting session user ID to nil when any user logs out of any area. Notice that it describes what the problem was and then describes what the solution was as well. So it's all there. If we come and we just look at this, we don't have to actually look at the code. We have a good idea of what the creator of this commit was trying to do. It's a good label on the commit to let us know what it's going to do when we add this change set to the project. Now I mentioned that you should keep the first line to less than 50 characters and then subsequent lines to less than 72 characters. Just as a reference, the longest line in this commit is about 60 characters wide. So that gives you an idea of how much you can fit online. You can go a little further than this. This is about 60 characters wide, and then you just need to hit a return, and then you can keep typing. So hopefully right here from the start, I can get you thinking about what a good descriptive commit message is so that all of our commits will be well labeled. That's going to be really important with Git because remember, Git works with these commit snapshots and allows us to exchange them between repositories. So it's very important that we have well-labeled commits so that if Bob makes a commit and then Mary is thinking about incorporating that commit into her project, she can look at it, see what that commit is, and decide to merge it into her project so that it becomes part of her project as well. So having well-labeled commits is really important. In the next movie, we'll take a look at how we can look at the log of previous commit messages.